Okay, guys, if you will, I'm at the bottom of my table of contents. I'm at page 40. Parallel and perpendicular lines is what we talked about today. So if you'll write that and then go ahead and flip. And I do have a lot of this already filled out for you. So if you will, go ahead and write in that part for me. And then again, this is just a lesson for those that were absent. So fill that out for me. Parallel lines are lines that never intersect. They are never going to cross each other. Now, what you need to know about them when we're talking about algebra is that they have the exact same slope. So you're looking for something with the exact same numbers. Okay. I like to use symbols. So my symbols are two parallel lines for a parallel symbol. I like to make my lines a little bit longer because they sometimes look like L's. Okay, now perpendicular lines, these are lines that intersect at a 90-degree angle. What you need to know is that they have opposite reciprocals for slopes. And the symbol for this is an upside down capital T. So, opposite reciprocals, this next part right here. Okay, if we're talking about an opposite reciprocal, what an opposite reciprocal is it's the opposite sign and you flip the fraction. Okay, opposite sign means change the sign. If it's positive, make it negative. If it's negative, make it positive. Flip the fraction just means change the fraction. So, some examples as I'm going, you can write these. When I have the fraction 3/4, the opposite reciprocal, since this one is positive, I make it negative, and then I flip the 4 and the 3. That is an opposite reciprocal. Okay, for 2, when I'm trying to get an opposite reciprocal, I'm going to change it to a negative, and it becomes 1/2. And the reason I know it's 1/2, if you need this, because 2 is over 1. So that flips the fraction. Okay, -7/8, I have to change that to a positive, and I flip it to 8/7. Okay, 1 is a tricky one. 1 is only -1. Even if you turn these into fractions, you can't really flip 1/1. Okay, now 0 is the hardest one and the one that we most missed. 0 is undefined. Okay, think about it. A 0 line goes like this, and an undefined line goes up and down. So that's what makes it perpendicular. Okay, now if you want to, you can go ahead and pause and write these 5 examples. This is going to be like the first 6 on your paper today. So if you want to write that, go ahead and pause and write, and we're going to determine if the slopes are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay, the way you're going to do this is you're going to use the formula m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And you're just going to have to do it twice. So like the first 2 points up here, they go together. So I'm going to do 2 minus 3 over 6 minus -2. Okay, I'm going to convert. You can use the calculator if you want to. I've let people use their calculator today. So if you wanted to do it in your calculator, you could just do alpha y equals and do 2 minus 3 over 6 minus -2 and just type it in as we did it. And that gives you -1/8. Okay, or if you want to do it by hand, you can. So the other 2 points I'm going to do by hand. I get 3 minus 0 over 3 minus -1. Okay, if you're going to do it by hand, 3 minus 0 is 3, and a double negative becomes a plus, so that is 4ths. Okay, now how you do this is you look at your 2 answers. If your answers are the exact same, they're parallel. They're not the same, so they're not parallel. If your answers are opposite signs, so one's positive and one's negative, and the fraction flips, they're perpendicular. I do have opposite signs, but my fraction didn't flip, so my answer for this one is neither. They're not parallel, they're not perpendicular. Okay, for my next one, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm going to take y2, which is 4 minus 2 over x2 is 5 minus 0. Okay, 4 minus 2 is 2, and 5 minus 0 is 5. Second point, I'm going to do 3 minus 8 over 3 minus 1. Okay, 3 minus 8 is -5, and 3 minus 1 is 2. So I look at my 2 answers, and remember, they always have to be in simplest form. 2/5 and -5/2. They're not the exact same, so they're not parallel, but they are opposite signs and the fractions flip. So therefore, this answer is perpendicular. And if you don't want to write the word, you're more than welcome to use the symbols. For example 3, I'm going to do 6 minus 8 over 2 minus -1. Okay, that would be -2 over, and that becomes 3. For the next one, I have 3 minus 2 over 3 minus -1. Changing my double negative, that is 1 over 4. These are not the exact same, and they are not reciprocals. So again, this is a neither. Okay, example 4. I'm going to do 7 minus -2 over 0 minus 0. Changing my double negative, I get 9 over 0. I really need y'all to check this in your calculator if you wanted to do it as alpha y equals, which I hope y'all choose to do this because it helps with your answers. It became 7 plus 2 and then 0 minus 0. If you get error in the calculator, you can't divide something into 0 groups. So when the calculator says error, that means it's undefined. Okay, for my next one, I'm doing -5 minus -5 over 6 minus 3. Change my double negative, and I get 0 over 3. So this time, if you do 0 divided by 3, you get 0. Now, if you'll refer back up to where we did opposite reciprocals, undefined and 0 are opposite reciprocals, and opposite reciprocals are perpendicular. Okay, for my last example of this style, we're going to do -4 minus 1 over 3 minus 3. That gives me -5 over 0. And remember, if it's over 0, that is undefined. Then I'm going to do 5 minus 1 over -4 minus -4. Change my double negative. I get 4 over 0. And if it's over 0, that is undefined. Since they are both undefined, they are actually parallel. They would just be both up and down lines. Okay, now I'm going to flip to the back, and we have 5 more examples with a little bit of different instructions. We're going to determine if the equations are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. If you want to go ahead and pause and write your 5 examples, you can. These won't take near as long. But when you're doing these, you have to make sure that they're in y equals. So the first 2 are in y equals. All I'm looking for is the slope. I got to know what the slope is. So I'm going to look at this 4/5 and this -4/5. I don't care about anything else. Okay. 4/5 and -4/5 are not the exact same, so they're not parallel. But they are opposite signs and the fraction flips, so these answers are perpendicular. The y-intercepts don't matter at all. Okay, for example 2, when I have y equals 1/3 x plus 2 and y equals -1/3 x, all I'm looking at is the slope, so whatever's in front of x. These are not the exact same, so they're not parallel. And they are opposite signs, but the fraction didn't flip. So these are neither. Be very careful with those. These are where people like to make a mistake. Okay, when you move on to example 3 and 4, they are no longer in y equals. So the first thing you must do is get it to y equals. So we're going to move the x by changing the sign. That gives me 6y equals -x plus 30. And then we're going to divide by the number in front of y, and that gives me -1/6 x plus 5. But all I care about is this -1/6. Okay, the second one, I don't have to move the x. They already did. So all I have to do is divide by the number in front of y. And that gives me 6x minus 2. And again, all I care about is that number in front of x. They are not the exact same, but they are opposite signs and flip fractions. So your answer is perpendicular. Okay, moving to example 4, I have 3x minus y equals 2. I'm going to move the x by changing the sign. That gives me -y equals -3x plus 2. And then I have to divide by -1 because there's a 1 in front of y, which gives me 3x minus 2. And all I care about is that 3. For my second equation, I again move the x by changing the sign. That gives me negative 4y equals negative 12x plus 4. And then I divide by the number in front of y. And that gives me negative 12 divided by 4 is 3x. And 4 divided by negative 4 is negative 1. But all I care about is that number in front of y. In front of x. Since these are the exact same, your answer is parallel. Okay, now this last one likes to trick people. So when you're doing this last one, if it's y equals 6 and x equals negative 1, do you notice how they only both have one letter? This will help you if you just draw a little graph, and there's my x-axis and my y-axis. Okay, for y equals 6, when you graph y equals 6, you'd be coming up here to about 6, and you always have to go across the axis. So my line would look something like this. Okay, for x equals negative 1, you would have to be at negative 1 on the x-axis, and you have to go across the x-axis. So you would have a line that looks something like that. And if you notice, I did it in 2 different colors so you can see. My pink and my green line, they are intersecting at a 90-degree angle. So these are perpendicular. All right, if you have any questions, let me know.